pair bonding between male and female in primitive cultures rose up and existed before the state did, before religious systems rose up. And so really on that point, anthropology and Christian theology agree. Marriage precedes everything. Marriage precedes everything. Marriage is a religious institution. Marriage is a legal institution. Marriage is an emotional institution. Marriage is a psychological institution. Marriage is all of these things. It's every one of them and all of them together. And we cannot say marriage is only going to be this and it's not going to be this. To do so is to misunderstand the very nature of marriage itself. There's a quote from a very good friend of mine, Maggie Gallagher. Many of you are familiar with her and her work and her writings. She really illustrates in a very dramatic way, in a very simple way, the profound social impact that marriage has, showing us that it is not simply a religious institution. She says, there is scarcely a dollar that state and federal governments spend on social programs that is not driven in large part by family fragmentation, those problems being crime, poverty, drug abuse, teen pregnancy, school failure, and mental and physical health problems. When marriage declines in a culture, all of the important social and personal measures of well-being also decline. The state has a vested interest in making sure that marriage is strong and that marriage is the institution that brings male and female together to create and care for the next generation. Marriage cannot simply be just a religious institution, nor can it simply be just a civil institution. It has to be all of these things. So in answer to their question, can we not just have civil marriage and religious marriage? No, because such a proposition fails to understand the very nature of marriage itself. Question number 5. Does marriage provide a common good? It's good that this is question number 5 because this is really the core of the issue. It's the center of the issue. Does marriage provide a common good? It's interesting that if you spin a globe, stab your finger down on any inhabited landmass, and go visit that culture at any time in history, you will find that they do marriage one way. They do marriage as a union between men and women. Now, you may find other differences. Differences in number of spouses, differences in division of labor. Men and women may do different work. But it is always about men and women, bringing men and women together. There is no exception of marriage being anything but a heterosexual institution in all human cultures. Think about all the great diversity that we see in all the cultures. Think back to looking at National Geographic magazines. I mean, it's fabulous in the diversity that God has created out there in human culture. But in all those cultures, there's one commonality. It's always heterosexual marriage. Now we have to ask ourselves the question, why do we find this universality? Why do we find this universality across all cultures? Who enforces it? Is it Jerry Falwell? Did Jerry Falwell go everywhere at every time and make sure that everybody did it heterosexually? Is it the Republicans? Did the Republicans go everywhere at every time and make sure that heterosexual marriage was the norm? Or was it the Catholic Church? No. We all know that it was nature. Nature enforces it, and nature's God drives it. That is why we find that universality. And isn't it actually kind of arrogant to say that as we stand at the stream of human experience and see that stream flowing like the great Amazon or Mississippi River, that it's always heterosexual, that somehow, just because we're in the modern age, that somehow we can improve upon that? Folks, that is the height of arrogance. We have to learn from history. We have to learn from experience that marriage needs to be, that it ought to be, a heterosexual union. Every culture needs natural marriage, marriage to be a union between men and women. No culture needs same-sex marriage. Not this culture, not any culture on the face of the earth present today, or any culture in the past. Because if they did need it, what would have happened? They would have invented it far beyond today. Remember now, let me remind you of this. It was only since 2001 that any nation on the face of the earth ever legalized any form of same-sex marriage. It was the Netherlands, and then shortly after that, Belgium, and then certain provinces in Canada, and then Massachusetts. It's only been in the couple last nanoseconds of human history that we have even entertained this discussion. And again, it's arrogance that drives that, human arrogance that drives that. Marriage does 4 primary jobs in every single society, in every single culture. And the anthropologists teach us this. If you look through text after text after text, how different cultures do marriage, you'll find that marriage always does 4 basic things in every culture. First of all, and we're going to look at these all individually. First of all, it socializes men. Marriage socializes men by linking men to women. A woman, Gail Collins, wrote a fabulous book. She is the editorial page editor at the New York Times. And in her spare time, whatever spare time she has, she managed to write this wonderful book called America's Women. And she wanted to examine what was the role that women played in the founding of America and the development of America, and not just the Betsy Rosses and the big names we know, but common women, everyday women. What was the role? And here's what she said. The key role that women played in American society, and really in all societies, is getting men to behave. Is getting men to behave. Men who are not linked to women are men who are not likely to behave. Let's think about this just real quickly, okay? On Saturday, the woman goes off to do what she's going to do with her friends, shopping or going to a movie or whatever. And she gives the husband a list of things to do. Does the husband get right on his list of things to do and get it done? Or does he think, my wife's coming back at 4. I could probably start on my work at about 3:30. And just lays on the couch and watches TV all day. You know, it's women that get men to behave. It's women that get men to be productive. She says at the founding of the colonies, the mother country, England, sent men over to found the colonies and to start producing and to send checks back to England. Well, the men came over here, but the checks weren't going back to England. So they sent some folks over to check out the situation, what was happening. And here's what Gail Collins says. She says, those people who came over to check on the men said the men are engaged in the activities that they are daily engaged in, which is bowling in the streets. The men were not working. They were goofing off. You know, it's bowling in the streets was the equivalent of us pulling the couch out onto the porch and watching TV out on the porch. You know, so what did they do? What did they do to get the men working? They sent women to the colonies. They sent women to the colonies for the men to marry. And those women got the men working, got them planting crops, got them producing things, got them building homes, got them starting businesses. That is a key role of what women do. Women socialize men. And it's not just true in America, but it's true in every single human civilization. That is a need, the need to get men productive. Second, marriage regulates sexuality. Every society needs sexual guardrails that all of us should live in between. And any society that fails to enforce these sexual guardrails is a society that ceases to be. Think about the great Roman and Greek Empire. Why are they not around anymore? Because they erased their sexual mores, their sexual values. Every society needs people to behave themselves sexually. And whether they've got sophisticated laws or simple cultural taboos, they have to have rules for here's how we behave. Marriage does that, and it enforces monogamy. And monogamy brings us to our third point. Marriage protects women. By enforcing monogamy, it protects women. A society's most serious problem is the unattached male. And we have to find a way to protect women from aggressive, selfish males. And we typically do this through marriage. And we typically do it through monogamy. When you have non-monogamous cultures, women become commodities to be used and traded. Think about what has happened in the sexual revolution. And think about the way that women have been treated since the sexual revolution. It has not been good for women. Society needs marriage to make sure that every woman has a man and every man has a woman as much as is conceivably possible, and that they both care for and protect one another. When you have a culture that has high rates of marriage, high rates of men connected permanently to women, and women connected to men, you have a culture where the domestic violence rate is significantly lower than in cultures where you don't have that. Marriage protects women. That's the third point. Fourth point is, and this is probably the most obvious to all of us, marriage provides mothers and fathers for children. As my good friend Maggie Gallagher says, marriage is the way that we make sure that the people who produce the baby stick around to care for and provide and raise the baby. Every society needs that to happen. Every society must encourage marriage because marriage makes men more productive, marriage protects women, and marriage gives children mothers and fathers. There are many among us who say that marriage as a social institution is really only about children, and that if there's not children involved, then we really don't care what the couples do. That's true to some degree, but we can't lose sight of marriage domesticates and socializes men, and it protects women. Okay? It serves that very important social function, but beyond that, it also provides the next generation of taxpayers, the next generation of producers, the next generation of good citizens to keep our society going. And mothers and fathers together are most likely to raise good citizens than anybody else. So we have to understand marriage plays a significant and very, very important social role. Question number 6. Is it healthy to put children in experimental families? We have to understand and recognize this fact. No society at any time, primitive or developed, ancient or modern, has ever raised a generation of children in same-sex homes. Never happened. And if we are going to start engaging in it, I don't know of a better definition of experiment than that. Nobody's ever done it. We don't know how it's going to turn out. So we necessarily, if we're going to go this way, we'll have to subject children to experimental families. Same-sex marriage is a vast, untested social experiment on children. This is a very, very key line, and I would encourage you to use it again and again because it gets right at the heart of the issue. Same-sex marriage is a vast, untested social experiment on children. When I was doing research for my book, Marriage on Trial, that I co-authored with a very good friend of mine, Dr. Bill Meyer, I wanted to see what lesbian scholars and gay scholars had to say about the process of growing up in intentionally motherless or fatherless families. And I found this book, the Lesbian Parenting Book. And I looked in the index for parenting, and I flipped to the section where they talked about this. And here's what they said. What they said is very, very instructive for us. These two doctors who wrote this book, two medical doctors and I guess a couple, two women, two lesbian women, said that our children are not the only ones who may find themselves in uncharted territory. It can be exhilarating and sometimes scary to be painting a new and different lesbian family tree. Notice the words there: uncharted territory, exhilarating, and scary. What do those words bring to mind? For me, it's things like bungee jumping or very scary roller coaster rides. And you know what? Those things are fantastic for adults. But you know what? We do not subject children to them. It would be cruel to strap a child into a bungee cord and throw them over and just let them have fun. It would be cruel to strap a young child into a roller coaster and send them on their way. But that is exactly what these doctors are telling us the lesbian family is like. And it gets even worse. Considering how boys would do in lesbian homes, they have this to say. It will be interesting to see over time whether lesbian sons have an easier or harder time developing their gender identity than do boys with live-in fathers. We live in a warning label society. At every turn, we are faced with a warning label to tell us that no animal or person was harmed in the development of this product. Whenever we use makeup, whenever we shampoo our hair, we're told no animal was harmed in the testing of this product. And we can rest easy. But when it comes to the lesbian home, the best thing that they can tell us is it will be interesting to see. They cannot assure us that no harm will come. The best they can tell us is it will be interesting to see. Folks, I don't want to gloss over that too quickly. I want us to really soak that in. We're talking about children. We don't experiment on animals, but we are experimenting on children. We are being asked to join and endorse a society-wide vast experiment on children. And as they tell us, it will be interesting to see how it turns out. How many of you think it will be interesting to see? Or how many of you think it would be actually cruel to subject children to this? We need to understand that and to help other people understand it. Question number 7. Whenever I debate this issue and I present the research, my opponent will always say, well, Mr. Stanton, you can say whatever you want to do and you can write all the books that you want, but the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric, and the American Psychological Association have all said that same-sex parenting is just fine. And you know what, folks? To mention all those organizations is pretty much of a discussion stopper. You know, they expect, what in the world am I going to do? I'm just Glenn Stanton, some guy from Focus on the Family, you know, who's written a couple of books. But what we come back and say is, those organizations are wrong, and I'll tell you exactly why. First of all, let's look at the statement that the American Academy of Pediatrics made about the effect of same-sex parenting on children. And they were really one of the first organizations and really one of the most dominant leaders in this, and a lot of the other organizations kind of followed suit. But here's what they said. There is a considerable body of professional literature that suggests children with parents who are homosexual have the same advantages and same expectations for health, adjustment, and development as children whose parents are heterosexual. But first we have to understand how the AAP came to this decision, the decision that we just read, the quote that we just looked at. Was it because all the learned pediatricians joined together, mulled through the research, discussed it, debated, and then after many months, many years, came to this conclusion? No, it was a small panel of 8 people that came up with this statement and really foisted it upon the larger membership of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And when their statement came out, this was an email that was sent from the lead author of the statement endorsing same-sex marriage to a select group of members in the American Academy of Pediatrics. Here's what she said in response to what the AAP was hearing from its membership on their same-sex marriage decision. It says, the AAP has received more messages, almost all of them critical, from members about the issue of same-sex parenting than it has ever received on any other topic. This is a serious problem, as it means it will become harder to continue the work that we have been doing to use the AAP as a vehicle for positive change. Notice that last line. It will become harder to continue the work we have been doing to use the AAP as a vehicle for positive change. Folks, does that sound like careful, deliberative science to you or activism? It's activism. And there is a reason that these organizations, and the AAP being one of them, cannot come to such a conclusion. That is because we simply have not had the experiment yet. Social sciences need two things in order to come to a sure, definitive conclusion. It needs a large population of people to study, and it needs a very, very long time to study that large population over, to see the impact. And as we're going to see in a minute, from the very studies that these medical organizations cite, we do not have either of those things. This is a quote from the actual article from Pediatrics, which was their statement endorsing same-sex parenting. The study itself admits, when you read the study itself, that they don't have the first thing that's necessary for social science to come to a conclusion. Let me read it. Research exploring the diversity of parental relationships among gay and lesbian parents is just beginning. The small and non-representative samples studied and the relatively young age of the children suggest some reserve. Notice that phrase, suggests some reserve. When we read that earlier statement just a minute ago, did you hear any reserve in their voice? No. But when you actually read the study itself, here's the warning that they give. We don't have large enough samples to study. Another study that they cite, which came out of the American Sociological Review, which is commonly referred to as the Stacy Biblar study, had this to say: thus far, no work has compared children's long-term achievement in education, occupation, income, and other domains of life. How can we conclude anything when the research is just beginning? Folks, we don't have to be scientists to know that something is seriously amiss here. You can't draw a conclusion when the experiment itself hasn't even started, and when the documents themselves that they've considered tell us that the samples are too small and no long-term work has been done. It leaves us in the place of not really knowing how same-sex homes will impact children, because we have not raised a generation of children in those homes. We would have to subject thousands of children, millions of children to such homes in order to find out what would happen. And I don't know of anybody who believes that's an ethical thing to do. But we do know what kind of families kids need. Question number 8. How do we know what kind of families children need? Well, we know from experience. We've had a lot of family experimentation in this nation over the past 30 to 40 years. We have probably had more family experimentation in this nation than any other nation on the face of the earth ever has. We have had experiments with easy divorce, no-fault divorce, single parenting by choice, cohabitation, the sexual revolution, and fatherlessness. And we have had millions of children raised in those kinds of homes over long periods of time. And let me ask you, what do you think the research says? Do you think the research says that this experimentation has elevated all of the important measures of human and child well-being? No. No significant measure of human well-being has been elevated by any of the experimentation that we have engaged in the past 30 to 40 years. It's a very dramatic statement. No human well-being measure has been elevated by any of the experimentation that we have seen over the past 30 to 40 years. We know what happens. Let's look at some of the research. And let's not look at conservative research or partisan advocacy research. Let's look at middle-of-the-road, common research. Two organizations. The first organization that we're going to look at is Child Trends. Child Trends is really more of a moderate or even perhaps liberal organization that advocates for child well-being. And as you can see on this information here, they did a study a number of years ago in 2002, and they asked, how does marriage impact children, and what type of family configuration is best at elevating and increasing healthy child development? Here's what they said. Thus, it is not simply the presence of two parents, as some have assumed, but the presence of two biological parents that seems to support child development. Now, let me ask you a question. How many children living in same-sex homes are living with both biological parents? If you think all the way